In 1962, a single Manhattan steakhouse burned through 40 pounds of butter a night, finishing steaks tableside, right in front of the customer. Today, most chain steakhouses do not even own a flambe cart. But here is the twist. The meals that built the American steakhouse are not the ones you see on menus now. Number 14 on this list was so theatrical that waiters trained for months just to serve it without setting a customer on fire. And number 3 was once the most ordered dinner in America before a marketing campaign convinced us it was old-fashioned. These 25 meals filled white tablecloth dining rooms from coast to coast, back when dinner was an event and the waiter cooked at your table. Then the chains came. The carts rolled into storage and we forgot. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 long-lost steakhouse meals America could not stop ordering before the chains took over. Number 25, calf's liver and onions. Walk into any steakhouse in 1955 and liver was right there on the menu next to the porterhouse. And it was not an afterthought. Thin slices of pale calf's liver, dredged in seasoned flour, seared hard in butter for 90 seconds a side, so the outside crisped and the inside stayed faintly pink. Over the top went a heaping pile of onions, cooked down slow until they turned sweet and golden and almost jammy. A plate cost around $1.25, less than half what a strip steak ran, and it was rich enough that nobody left hungry. The secret was the timing. Cook it 30 seconds too long, and it turned to shoe leather, which is exactly why a whole generation grew up swearing they hated it. The steakhouses that did it right had it down to muscle memory. When the chains arrived with their laminated menus and central commissaries, liver was the first thing cut. Too fussy, too cheap, too associated with what they wanted us to leave behind. Number 24. Swiss steak. Despite the name, there was nothing Swiss about it. The word came from swissing, an old term for pounding meat between rollers to break down the fibers. Steakhouses took a tough, inexpensive round steak, dusted it in flour, browned it hard, then smothered it in stewed tomatoes, onions, and celery, and let it braise low for 2 hours until a fork went through it like butter. It came to the table swimming in its own gravy, served over mashed potatoes or wide egg noodles, the kind of plate that fogged up the dining room windows on a cold night. A round steak cost about 40 cents a pound, which made this the dinner a man ordered when he wanted steak, but the wallet said otherwise. It carried the whole working middle class through the post-war years, then quietly vanished when braised stopped sounding like an upgrade and started sounding like leftovers. Number 23. Salisbury steak. Here is a dish so American it was named after a doctor. Dr. James Salisbury believed minced beef was easier to digest, and by the 1950s his idea had become a steakhouse mainstay. Ground sirloin mixed with a little onion, egg, and breadcrumb, shaped into a thick oval, seared, then finished in a deep brown mushroom and onion gravy. It looked like a steak, it cut like something softer, and it cost about half what a real cut did. For a family of 4, this was how everyone got steak on a Friday without bankrupting the household. Gravy was the whole point, dark and glossy, poured generously enough to drown the mashed potatoes beside it. Then the frozen dinner company stole the name, slapped it on a tray, and froze it solid. Within 20 years, Salisbury steak stopped meaning a freshly griddled patty in a real kitchen and started meaning the thing in the blue box. The steakhouse version simply disappeared. Number 22. London broil. There is no cut of beef called London broil, and there never was. It was a method, and a clever one. Steakhouses took a lean, cheap flank or top round, marinated it for hours in oil, vinegar, garlic, and Worcestershire, then broiled it fast and hot until the outside charred. The trick that made it work, the trick the chains forgot, was slicing. You cut it thin, and always against the grain, on a sharp diagonal, so each slice fell apart tender instead of stringy. Served fanned across the plate with the juices pooling underneath. It looked far more expensive than the $1, or so it cost. Carve it wrong, and it was a jaw workout. Carve it right, and it rivaled a sirloin. That knowledge lived in the carving station, in the hands of the man with the long knife, and when the carving stations closed, the knowledge went with them. Number 21, beef tongue. This one makes people flinch now, but in a 1950s steakhouse, sliced beef tongue was a delicacy you paid good money for. The whole tongue was simmered for hours with onion, bay leaf, and peppercorn until it was meltingly tender, then peeled, pressed, and sliced paper thin. It came to the table cold with a sharp mustard or horseradish sauce, or hot in a raisin and brown sugar glaze that sounds strange until you taste how the sweetness plays against the rich meat. A whole tongue cost almost nothing because butchers had more than they could sell, and steakhouses turned that bargain into something elegant. The texture surprised everyone, softer and more delicate than any muscle cut. It survived in delicatessens a while longer, but the white tablecloth version, the kind sliced to order from a steaming platter, is gone almost entirely. We decided certain parts of the animal were beneath us, right around the time we could afford to think that way. Number 20, Rumaki. Before your steak ever arrived, the appetizer that defined the era was Rumaki, a little bundle of the tiki bar scene of the 1950s that somehow ended up on every steakhouse table. A piece of chicken liver and a slice of water chestnut, marinated in soy sauce, ginger, and brown sugar, wrapped in bacon, skewered, and broiled until the bacon crackled and the liver went soft and rich inside. They arrived hot on a small plate, glistening, 2 or 3 per person, and they disappeared in seconds. The water chestnut gave a cool snap against the warm liver. The bacon brought the salt, and the marinade tied it together with a sweet, smoky glaze. A plate cost under $1, and it set the tone for the whole meal. This was going to be an evening, not just dinner. Cocktail culture faded, the tiki craze died, and Rumaki became a punchline at theme parties instead of the genuine pleasure it actually was. Number 19. The Relish tray. First pattern break. Here is where the old steakhouse showed you what kind of place it was. Before you ordered anything, before the waiter even took your drink, a tray appeared. Crisp celery sticks and carrot curls sitting in crushed ice. Radishes cut into rosettes, green olives, pickled beets, sweet gherkins, a little crock of cottage cheese, and almost always a cold ramekin of liver pâté or a sharp cheddar spread with crackers. It was free. That was the genius of it. The relish tray cost the house pennies and bought enormous goodwill, giving you something to nibble while the kitchen did its slow, careful work. It also did something the chains would later spend fortunes trying to engineer. It made you feel taken care of the moment you sat down. The whole thing was a quiet promise that no one was rushing you. Then dinner became a transaction. Table turnover became a metric, and the free tray was the first casualty of the calculator. Number 18, Jumbo Shrimp Cocktail. This was not the sad little ring of shrimp draped over a glass rim you get now. The classic steakhouse shrimp cocktail was an event. 4 or 5 enormous shrimp, sometimes the size of a child's fist, were poached gently in court bouillon until just firm, chilled hard on a bed of shaved ice, and hung over the lip of a footed silver coupe. In the center, a small well of cocktail sauce sat, so loaded with fresh horseradish it cleared your sinuses on the first bite. The shrimp had a clean snap and a faint sweetness, and the sauce hit cold and fierce right behind it. At $3 in 1960, it was one of the priciest things you could order before the entree, and ordering it told the table you meant business. The chains shrank the shrimp, sweetened the sauce, and turned an indulgence into a default. The grand version, the one that arrived smoking with dry ice fog at the fancy places, is almost a memory now. Number 17. Oysters Rockefeller. Born at Antoine's in New Orleans in 1899 and named for John D. Rockefeller because the sauce was so rich, this was the appetizer that announced a serious steakhouse. Fresh oysters on the half-shell, topped with a deep green puree of spinach, herbs, butter, and a splash of anise liqueur, then baked on a bed of rock salt until the edges bubbled and browned. They came to the table on the hot salt, still sizzling, and the contrast between the briny oyster underneath and the buttery herb crust on top was unlike anything else on the menu. The original recipe was a guarded secret, and every steakhouse claimed theirs was closest to the source. A half dozen ran a couple of dollars and felt like luxury itself. Preparing them properly took real labor, shucking to order, building each one by hand, and that labor is exactly what the chains engineered out of existence. You will not find them under a heat lamp. Number 16. French onion soup. Second pattern break. Now here is a dish the food industry quietly hollowed out. A real steakhouse. French onion soup started with onions, pounds of them, sliced thin and cooked down for nearly an hour until they collapsed into a sweet, dark, jammy mess. That alone was the difference between greatness and garbage. Then beef stock, a splash of sherry, a slow simmer, ladled into a heavy crock, capped with a slab of toasted bread and a thick blanket of Gruyere, and run under the broiler until the cheese bubbled over the rim and browned in sheets you had to crack with your spoon. It cost the kitchen almost nothing and tasted like it took all day, because it did. Then came the canned base and the bag of pre-cut frozen onions, and the pre-shredded cheese, and the soup that once took an hour of patient caramelizing became a salty shortcut. Most people today have only ever tasted the shortcut. They have no idea what they are missing. Number 15. Escargot, snails. American diners in the 1960s ate snails by the millions and considered it the height of sophistication. Imported French snails were tucked into the wells of a special dimpled dish, each one buried under a thick paste of butter, whipped with garlic, parsley, and shallot, then baked until the butter foamed and the garlic perfumed the whole table. They came with little tongs to grip the shell and a narrow two-pronged fork to pull the snail free. The real treasure was the leftover garlic butter, which you sopped up with crusty bread until the dish was scraped clean. The snail itself was mild and chewy, almost beside the point. The butter was the star. A dozen cost a few dollars and made an ordinary Tuesday feel like Paris. It survived as a special occasion novelty for a while, but the chains never touched it. And as the old French-influenced steakhouses closed one by one, escargot left the American table almost entirely. Number 14. Bananas Foster. Here is the theatrical one. Created at Brennan's in New Orleans in 1951 and named for a local civic leader, Bananas Foster was the dessert that emptied the dining room of conversation. The waiter wheeled a cart to your table, melted butter and brown sugar in a copper pan over a flame, laid in split bananas, dusted them with cinnamon, then poured in rum and banana liqueur and tipped the pan toward the fire. A wall of flame shot up 2 feet high, the whole room turned to watch, and the alcohol burned off into a thick caramel syrup spooned hot over cold vanilla ice cream. Waiters trained for months to do this without scorching an eyebrow off a guest. It cost a couple of dollars and bought a memory you kept for 50 years. Live fire at the table is an insurance nightmare for a corporate chain, so the cart rolled into the back, and the show ended. Number 13. Cherries Jubilee. If Bananas Foster was the rowdy cousin, Cherries Jubilee was the elegant one, and it was reportedly invented for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897. dark, sweet cherries simmered in their own syrup with a little sugar and orange zest, then flamed tableside with warmed kirsch or brandy, the blue flame dancing low across the surface of the pan. Once the fire died, the hot cherries and their ruby syrup were spooned over vanilla ice cream, the cold and hot meeting in a single bite. It was less explosive than the bananas and more refined, the kind of finale ordered by the table celebrating an anniversary. The whole production cost the restaurant pocket change in ingredients but bought an evening's worth of romance. As the flambe cart disappeared, so did this. The frozen and bottled cherry topping that replaced it is a pale, sticky imitation of a dish that once arrived on fire. Number 12. Baked Alaska. This was the dessert that defied physics, and everyone knew it. A layer of sponge cake, a dome of hard, frozen ice cream piled on top, the whole thing sealed completely under a thick coat of meringue. It was then slid into a blazing hot oven, or torched at the table until the meringue browned in peaks, while the ice cream inside stayed frozen solid. The meringue acted as insulation, and the math actually works. It came out looking like a snow-capped mountain, sometimes flamed with liquor for good measure, and a server would slice it open to reveal the still frozen center to gasps from the table. A grand restaurant might charge $4 or $5 for one large enough to share. It took skill and split-second timing, and it was pure showmanship, which is precisely why it could not survive a business model built on speed and consistency. You almost never see it anymore. Number 11. Tableside Caesar salad. Third pattern break. Here is something the salad bar era erased completely. The original Caesar salad, created by Cesar Cardini in Tijuana in the 1920s, was never meant to come pre-tossed from a kitchen. It was built in front of you in a large wooden bowl by a tableside captain who took it seriously. He rubbed the bowl with a cut clove of garlic, mashed anchovies into a paste, cracked in a coddled egg, squeezed fresh lemon, drizzled olive oil while whisking, then tossed in crisp romaine and house croutons and a snowfall of grated Parmesan, adjusting as he went. You watched a salad become a performance. It cost a couple of dollars, and it was worth every cent because no two were ever identical. Then Caesar became a bottle on a supermarket shelf, a creamy beige liquid sold by the gallon, and a generation grew up thinking that was the dish. The real one, the living one made at your elbow, is nearly extinct. Number 10. The iceberg wedge with blue cheese. Long before kale and arugula, the Steakhouse salad was a quarter head of iceberg lettuce, cold and dense and crackling, sitting upright on a chilled plate. Over it went a ladle of thick, chunky blue cheese dressing, then crumbled bacon, a scatter of diced tomato, and sometimes a grind of black pepper, and a few extra crumbles of pungent blue. That was it. Critics later mocked iceberg as nutritionally empty, but they missed the point entirely. The whole appeal was texture and temperature, the icy crunch of the lettuce against the heavy, tangy dressing, a cold and refreshing counterweight to the rich meal coming. It cost the kitchen almost nothing. A head of lettuce ran a dime, and it sat on every steakhouse menu in America. The chains kept a version, but stripped of the hand-crumbled bacon and the from-scratch dressing, it became another sad afterthought, instead of the deliberate palate cleanser it was built to be. Number 9. Creamed spinach. No side to find the Steakhouse like creamed spinach, and almost no one makes the real thing at home anymore. Fresh spinach, blanched and squeezed bone dry, then chopped and folded into a bechamel built from butter, flour, and cream, seasoned with nutmeg, onion, and a little garlic, sometimes finished with Parmesan until it was thick enough to stand a spoon in. It arrived in its own small dish, deep green and luxuriously rich, the kind of thing that made even spinach-hating children clean the bowl. The cream tamed the iron bite of the greens completely, turning a humble vegetable into something almost decadent. It was the perfect foil to a fatty cut of beef, cutting through the richness while adding more of its own. A few of the old institutions still guard their recipe, but the boxed frozen version that replaced it, watery and bland, bears no resemblance to the dish that earned its place beside a porterhouse. Number 8. Delmonico potatoes. Named for the legendary New York restaurant that shaped American fine dining, Delmonico potatoes were the steakhouse's answer to the question of how to make a side dish unforgettable. Potatoes were parboiled, diced, or sliced, layered into a buttered dish with cream and a heavy hand of grated cheese, topped with buttered breadcrumbs, and baked until the top turned golden and crisp, and the inside went soft and rich. Some kitchens made them with a hint of nutmeg, some folded in a little egg yolk for richness, every house guarding its own version. They came to the table bubbling, the breadcrumb crust crackling under the spoon, the creamy potato underneath almost like a savory custard. A potato cost pennies, and this turned it into the most requested side in the room. The chains traded it for the frozen, uniform, pre-portioned baked potato in foil, and a whole tradition of cream and cheese potato cookery quietly faded out. Number 7. The onion ring loaf. Fourth pattern break. Here is the side dish that was pure spectacle, and the food industry could never replicate it. At certain old steakhouses, onion rings did not arrive in a basket. They arrived as a loaf. Hundreds of thinly battered, deep-fried onion rings were stacked and pressed together in a ring mold, while hot, so they fused into a single, towering golden brick. The loaf was then turned out onto a platter and brought to the table to gasps. You pulled rings off the tower one at a time, each one shatteringly crisp on the outside and sweet and soft within. It was excessive, theatrical, and gloriously impractical, which is exactly why people loved it and remembered it for decades. Building one took a skilled hand and perfect timing with the fryer. There was no shortcut. The chains found it impossible to standardize and quietly killed it in favor of the frozen bagged ring. An entire generation has never seen a loaf of onion rings, and that is a genuine loss. Number 6. Beef Stroganov. Russian by origin, named for the Stroganov family, but by the 1950s, utterly American and utterly beloved. Tender strips of beef. Tenderloin, seared fast, then simmered briefly in a sauce of beef stock, mustard, and sour cream until it turned velvety and tangy, studded with sautéed mushrooms and onions, all of it spooned over buttered egg noodles or rice. The good steakhouse version used real tenderloin and finished the sauce to order, never letting the sour cream break or curdle, which took a careful cook. It was rich without being heavy, the mustard and sour cream giving it a brightness that kept you coming back for another forkful. For a couple of dollars, it delivered the flavor of an expensive cut in a comforting, homey form. Then the frozen dinner companies and the canned soup recipe cards got hold of it, replaced the tenderloin with ground beef and the fresh sauce with condensed soup, and the elegant original slipped out of memory. Number 5. Beef Wellington. This was the dish a steakhouse rolled out when it wanted to prove it had a real kitchen. A whole beef tenderloin, seared, slathered with a finely chopped mushroom paste called duxelles, and sometimes a layer of pâté, then wrapped entirely in puff pastry and baked until the crust turned deep golden and shattering, while the beef inside stayed a perfect rosy medium rare. Getting it right was genuinely hard. The pastry had to cook through without overcooking the beef, and a soggy bottom crust meant failure. It was carved tableside in thick slices, each one showing the rings of pink meat, dark mushroom, and crisp gold pastry. At $6 or $7, it was among the most expensive things on the menu, reserved for anniversaries and closing the big deal. It demanded a trained chef and could not be mass-produced or held under a lamp, which is exactly why the chains never even attempted it. It simply disappeared from the American mainstream. Number 4. Lobster Thermidor. When surf met turf at the Grand Old Steakhouse, this was the surf. A whole lobster was split, the meat pulled, chopped. and bound in a creamy sauce of egg yolk, brandy, and mustard, then piled back into the shell, topped with cheese, and broiled until the top browned and bubbled. It came to the table still in the shell, golden and luxurious, the rich sauce clinging to every piece of sweet lobster meat. Created in Paris in the 1890s and named for a play, it became the ultimate American splurge by mid-century, often paired with a fillet for the legendary surf and turf platter. At $8 or $10, it was the most extravagant order in the house, the thing you got when the promotion came through. The labor was enormous. Every lobster broken down and rebuilt by hand, and that labor is precisely what the chains stripped away. Today, lobster shows up as a tail and a cup of drawn butter, and the grand stuffed shell is a relic. Number 3, prime rib. Here is the one America truly could not stop ordering. The dish a marketing machine eventually convinced us was old-fashioned. A massive standing rib roast, crusted in salt and pepper, roasted slowly for hours until the outside browned deep, and the inside ran a uniform rosy pink from edge to edge. It was wheeled to your table on a gleaming cart. It was carved to order by a captain in a tall hat who asked how thick you liked it and served with its own natural juices. A boat of horseradish cream and a puffy golden Yorkshire pudding to catch the drippings. For $4 or $5, you got a slab of beef that tasted like an occasion. The roving carving cart was the beating heart of the steakhouse experience, the thing that made dinner feel like theater. Then the chains discovered that a thin grilled sirloin was faster, cheaper, and needed no skilled carver. The carts were sold off, the slow roast gave way to the quick grill, and the dish that defined American steak dinners faded to a weekend special. Number 2. Chateaubriand for 2. This was romance on a platter. The thick center cut of the beef tenderloin, the most tender section of the entire animal, was roasted whole and traditionally served for 2 people, carved tableside into thick medallions and fanned across a warm platter. It came with a classic béarnaise sauce, that delicate emulsion of butter, egg yolk, and tarragon, and a careful arrangement of turned vegetables and chateau potatoes. The captain did the carving right beside you, slicing the rosy meat against the grain so each piece nearly fell apart, then plating it with ceremony for both diners. At $10 or $12 for 2, it was the order for an engagement, an anniversary, the night that mattered. It required the finest cut, a skilled hand at the table, and time. None of those fit a model built on speed and volume. When the captains vanished and the platters for 2 went with them, the most romantic order in the American steakhouse simply ceased to exist. Number 1. Steak Diane. At the very top is the dish that was the soul of the old steakhouse, the one that proved the whole experience was about more than meat. A thin medallion of beef tenderloin, pounded flat, was cooked entirely in front of you on a rolling cart. The captain seared it fast in butter, added shallots and mushrooms, then poured in cognac and tipped the pan into the flame so fire roared up between you and your dinner. He whisked in Worcestershire, mustard and cream, swirled the sauce until it gleamed, and plated the steak with a flourish. The whole performance taking under 5 minutes and holding the entire table spellbound. It cost $6 or $7, and it was worth twice that for the show alone. Steak Diane was everything the chains could not be. It required a master at your table, live fire in the dining room, and a kitchen that believed dinner should be unforgettable. When efficiency replaced ceremony, the carts rolled into storage for good, and the greatest piece of theater in American dining went dark. Here is my challenge. Pick one of these and bring it back this week. Make the creamed spinach. Caramelize the onions for a real French onion soup, the slow way. Flame a pan of bananas if you are feeling brave. Then tell me in the comments which one you tried. and whether it tasted like the steakhouse your family used to dress up for. Because these were never just menu items. They were an evening, a ceremony, a reason to put on a jacket and sit up straight. And we traded all of it for speed. Tell me which one you miss most. I want to know if the prime rib cart gets more love than Steak Diane.